US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in a podcast has said that the reason why India-United States trade deal collapsed is because Prime Minister Narendra Modi did not call President Donald Trump, and the Americans then moved the goalposts. Now, let me get a bit into what Howard Lutnick has given away. He has given away the negotiation tactic of United States in that podcast, according to which there are certain ideas based on which the Trump team is working. One of which is that everybody in the world, every nation in the world wants to cut a deal with the US, and they are in a hurry and that they are desperate. So the technique or the tactic is that they have a staircase model in their mind, that they would have these nations queue up, call one, put them on the staircase, cut the deal, get the next one, put them on the next stair and cut the deal, then put them on the next ladder, next one on the next ladder and cut the deal. That's their idea of negotiation, and the staircase is such that with every other deal, the tariffs keep increasing. Now, in the case of India, Lutnick team set up the table, so to say, as he admits that he was setting up the table, he was setting up the nitty-gritties, and the closing of the deal would be done by the president. As in the case of other countries, so in the case of India. In the case of India, they fixed the time. Like they did in the case of United Kingdom, so in the case of India, it's because they believe that everyone is desperate. They fix the timeline, they fix the deadline, they fix the tariffs. You have to just sign on the dotted line, come in the queue, sign and go. Now, India, because there were certain red lines that were not acceptable, waited and wanted the negotiation team to finalize everything, leave nothing for the leaders, get everything done, and then you sign on the dotted line, and then maybe a call can happen between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. The Americans said, no, this is not how it works. It has to work on our conditions, on the way that we decide. And, you're dealing with a bunch of mercurial megalomaniacs. They are not people who have come from politics. They are people who have essentially come from either business or are technocrats. And so they believe they have their own ideas of how the world works, which it does not. And so it happened that because those red lines were not addressed, and India said that let the bureaucrats really handle this and then only a call can happen, the call did not happen. But it gives an interesting insight into how the art of the deal really functions. It's like my way or highway. The thugs of yore would gather people and say, okay, fine, this person is getting a deal, maybe a fixed match, but if you want this deal, you have to agree to these conditions. If you don't agree to these conditions, you don't get that deal. Once a deal is finalized, you go to the next person and say, okay, fine, if you want that deal, you have to agree to these conditions, and so on and so forth. Now, India has made it clear that A, you cannot fix deadlines unilaterally, and B, that we have, apart from your deadlines, we have our red lines. You address them. Now, what are the red lines on the part of India? There are two red lines. One, American dairy, and two, genetically modified crops, or GMOs as they call it. Now, in the case of United States, they have no problem producing and consuming genetically modified crops and products. In India, we don't accept that. Similarly, in the case of American dairy, A, because they can flood our market, there can be a glut of American dairy products in India, so we have to protect our small and marginal farmers. Remember, much of our dairy farming happens by the small and marginal farmers on the side, apart from their agriculture activities or horticulture activities, so they have to be protected. B, there is a problem. American cows are fed meat or beef. Now, which means that their milk and hence the milk products are not kosher insofar as Indian sentiment is concerned, Indian mass sentiment is concerned. So that's a red line. The Americans were not agreeing to it, and that's why the deal was struck. Nevertheless, talks had happened, reached about 15% agreement, but then they said, okay, fine, fix this deadline, sort it out. Red lines not addressed, deadline fixed. They want a call to be made by Prime Minister Modi to President Trump. Obviously, the call cannot happen, because what if? Now we know that President Trump has this habit of quoting from private conversations, quoting them out of context, like he did just a day back when he said, Oh, Prime Minister Modi called me and said, sir, I want to meet you.
And Prime Minister Modi came to see me. Sir, may I see you, please? Yes, I have a very good relationship with him. He's not that happy with me because, you know, they're paying a lot of tariffs.
No, it was a state visit. It was a formal visit of the Prime Minister of the country to the United States, and that he was received at the White House as a guest. Now, that is not like, sir, I want to meet you, but Trump, being Trump, can do that. And he did that. So the reason why the call did not happen is because India was very clear that the deadline cannot be fixed unilaterally and the red lines need to be addressed. Both the things were not done by the Americans. Rest of what happened is essentially art of the deal so far as the Americans are concerned, so far as Howard Lutnick is concerned. But so far as we are concerned, it was an act of thuggy to which we did not agree. I think my very important takeaway is that India has really stood its ground and been very firm on what needs to be done to take the India-United States trade deal forward and make it happen. And unless all those issues are sorted, it's not that Prime Minister Modi does not want to have a call with the President of the United States. There have been otherwise calls made. For example, President Trump spoke to Prime Minister Modi on his birthday and wished him. Other calls have also happened, but so far as the trade deal is concerned, it cannot happen unless those issues are sorted. Lutnick again says that India did come back after 3 weeks, but then he said, now the goalpost has changed. Conditions, terms and conditions have changed. You know the reason why? Because they are working with this preconceived notion that they can con one nation, move on to the next one, and con that nation based on the earlier one. That's what the impression comes out of this negotiation style that Lutnick has revealed in that All In podcast. But what is important is that irrespective of what the world does, I mean, the United States has cut deals, to sign trade deals with the United Kingdom, with Australia, with Indonesia, with Vietnam, with Philippines. But when it comes to India, we have to protect our own interests, and that's what the Modi government has done by not signing the deal which meets American deadline, American terms and conditions, and that too on an escalatory ladder and an escalatory matrix where if you don't agree to that deadline, then you pay a higher tariff. I mean, what kind of trade, commerce, math, arithmetic, chemistry is this? That the tariff or the rate of tariff between two nations, between two sovereign trading nations, is determined by a certain date and deadline, that if you sign the deal with this deadline, you get a certain tariff. If you sign the deal on another deadline, which is further down the path, then there is a different tariff. So I think this is what comes out of the podcast. But remember, there is always more than meets the eye in politics. So in geopolitics, it's not about tariff. It's not about trade deal. It is not about commerce. It's about one man's megalomania, one man's ego. Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He wanted Prime Minister Modi to recommend. For that, he wanted Prime Minister Modi to admit that Trump played a role in ceasefire between India and Pakistan on Operation Sindur. Prime Minister Modi, like in the case of trade deal, so in the case of Operation Sindur, was firm and stood his ground and said that no, there was no role whatsoever of the Americans insofar as ceasefire is concerned. So no question whatsoever of admitting to the role of President Trump. So far as Nobel is concerned, all the best. He can get it Nobel for the other 7 wars he claims to have stopped, not the India-Pakistan war. Now, let's come to our domestic politics. What we have seen is that between Operation Sindur and the trade deal, the opposition sought to create a picture that India somehow has capitulated to the pressure of the Americans. And that's why that meme fest by opposition, particularly the Congress, of Narendra surrender. They thought that the silence of the Prime Minister, and that's the reason, in fact, that this opposition got this opportunity to push this narrative, because Prime Minister has maintained a dignified silence. Opposition thought that this is surrender. Now, you hear it from the mouth of the American Commerce Secretary that India never surrendered. You hear it from American leadership that India is not succumbing to whatever pressure they have been putting India on. the new bill that's coming up in the US Congress, which would impose tariffs as high as 500% if you have business relationship with Russians or are buying their oil, includes India as a target. We have maintained that insofar as we are concerned, our decision as to from where we would buy our oil depends on our own national security and energy security interests. So in both the cases, in Operation Sindur and post-Operation Sindur and the trade deal and the purchase of Russian oil, I think it clearly comes out, if you connect the dots, based purely on statements coming out of Washington, D.C., that the Modi government has very strongly and firmly stood its ground and maintained a dignified silence, which is essentially a window left ajar just in case there is a change of mind in Washington, D.C. and in the Trump administration, that India is not an ally worth losing in this game of checkers that world geopolitics has become post the coming of Donald Trump as president at the White House for the second time.